All right, before you judge me, hear me out. I know what you're probably thinking. How could she? But let me just say, I never thought I'd end up in a situation like this. In fact, if you had told me a year ago that I'd be telling a story like this, I would have laughed in your face. I was that person who would judge the other woman, or the cheater, from the sidelines. So sure of myself, so confident in my own relationship that I thought nothing could ever shake it. So, before you get all high and mighty, let me explain. This isn't a sob story or an excuse. I'm not looking for sympathy. I just want you to understand how it happened. I want you to see the whole picture. Because when you hear the whole story, you might just get it. Or at least, understand why I made the choices I did. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize that anyone can find themselves in my shoes. My name's Emily, and my husband is John. We've been married for 6 years. At least we were. Yeah, that's right. Were. But this isn't going to be some rant about how bad my marriage was. Far from it. Our marriage was solid, or at least I thought it was. John was my best friend, my rock. He was the kind of guy who would leave a note in my lunchbox or text me to tell me he was thinking about me, even though we were both busy with our careers. But sometimes, things aren't as perfect as they seem on the surface. Sometimes, the cracks are there, and you don't see them until it's too late. Now, here's where it starts to get tricky. Over the last year, I started hanging out more with a few of John's friends. I know, that's a huge red flag, right? You're probably already thinking, this sounds like trouble. But bear with me. They weren't just any friends. They were his friends. Close friends. The kind of friends who had been around for years, the ones I thought I could trust. There were 3 of them, Chris, Ryan, and Jason. I'm not going to pretend like I didn't enjoy their company. They were fun, and honestly, they made me laugh. The kind of guys who could easily make you forget about the stress of your day with one joke. And, well, John was always so busy with work. Sometimes, I'd end up hanging out with them in his absence. A couple of drinks, a few jokes, and a few hours of relaxed conversation. It was harmless, right? At least that's what I told myself. But then, it wasn't harmless anymore. The first time it happened, I couldn't even believe it myself. I had no intention of crossing any lines. I was just there, you know. And Chris had this way of making everything feel exciting. And before I knew it, one evening turned into a few, and a few turned into more. I never told John. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that it was just a bit of fun. After all, I wasn't doing anything serious, right? But eventually, the lines blurred. The little moments, the stolen touches, the lingering glances started to build up. It didn't happen overnight, and I certainly didn't plan on it. But one evening, we all ended up at Ryan's place after a long day. The 4 of us, me John's closest friends, drinking, talking, and just letting loose. John wasn't there that night. It was a night just like any other, until it wasn't. Chris made a joke, something stupid, and I laughed. But as I looked at him, for some reason, everything changed. It wasn't the joke anymore. It wasn't the atmosphere or the drink in my hand. It was just the way he looked at me. It was the way he leaned in just a little too close, the way his breath felt against my ear. And without thinking, I kissed him. It wasn't planned. It wasn't intentional. But it happened. And in that moment, I knew I had crossed a line, and I couldn't take it back. But here's the thing, I didn't want to take it back. I didn't want to feel guilty or ashamed. I felt something in that moment that I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt alive. Sin. Desired. In a way I hadn't realized I'd been craving for years. And yeah, that made me feel awful. But it also made me feel like I was finally getting something that had been missing from my life. So I kept going. I kept seeing Chris. I kept telling myself it was just a fling. Just a little distraction. It wasn't a big deal, right? After all, John would never find out. He was so trusting, so focused on his career. He didn't know about the late night texts, the quick meetups, or how I'd sneak around to spend time with Chris when he wasn't home. It wasn't a full-on affair yet. And that's where it all started to get messy. Because every time I saw Chris, I felt more and more like a different person. And at the same time, I was more and more trapped in my own web of lies. But I wasn't ready to confront it. I wasn't ready to face what I was doing. I wasn't ready to face the fact that I was choosing this, choosing something outside of my marriage. But it was getting harder to keep it all together. The lies, the guilt, the fear of John finding out. Everything was building up, and I could feel it, the pressure of it all. I could feel it weighing on me. So before you judge me, before you think I'm just some terrible person who made a huge mistake, just remember this. Things aren't always as black and white as we want them to be. Sometimes, you're in a situation where you're not even sure how it got this far. And when you realize it's too late, you don't know how to fix it. But I'll tell you this much, everything in my life was about to change, and I had no idea how to stop it. I know what you're probably thinking. I must be a terrible person, right? And you know what? Maybe I am. But this is me telling you the truth. I'm not proud of what I did. And believe me, I never thought I'd be in a position where I'd have to explain myself to anyone. But here we are. At first, I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep everything under control. The lies, the secrecy, the guilt. I thought I could go on with my life, with John, pretending that everything was fine. I thought I could keep my worlds separate. But I was wrong. So wrong. The thing about secrets is that they have a way of eating away at you. And eventually I couldn't keep it all together. It was like living in two completely different realities, and no matter how hard I tried to balance them, something had to give. Every time John left for work, I'd be in this frantic rush, texting Chris to set up a meeting. Sometimes it was just a coffee, sometimes a drink, but each time I told myself this is the last time. This is where it ends. But it never ended. And the guilt just kept building, layer after layer, until I was suffocating under it. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't that bad. After all, I wasn't falling in love with Chris. I was just getting by. I told myself it was harmless. Just something to fill the emptiness I felt when John wasn't around. I convinced myself it was just physical, just a bit of fun. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The first time I saw John after seeing Chris that afternoon, I couldn't look him in the eye. The way he kissed me, the way he looked at me, it was like I wasn't even there. I felt so far away, so detached. And the worst part, I didn't know how to fix it. How could I go back to being the wife he thought I was? How could I act like nothing had changed when everything inside me felt like it had? The worst part about all of this, it wasn't just Chris. It was that when I was with him, I felt like someone else. I felt seen, heard, and wanted in a way I hadn't in a long time. But I wasn't falling in love with Chris. It wasn't love. No. What I was addicted to was the feeling, the excitement, the attention, and I wasn't getting it at home. It wasn't that John wasn't good to me. He was. He always had been. But we were growing apart. I wasn't sure when it happened, but we were both so consumed with our own lives, our own careers, that we stopped talking to each other the way we used to. It wasn't that John had done anything wrong. He hadn't, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I started to feel like I was just there, a wife, a partner, but not really seen, not really wanted the way I had once felt. And then there was Chris. The problem was, it wasn't just Chris. It was his friends too. Ryan and Jason, all three of them. And I know how that sounds, believe me. It sounds insane, doesn't it? How could I get involved with three of John's best friends? But each one of them made me feel a little more alive, a little more noticed. Each one of them made me feel like I was important. I know I should have stopped, but I didn't. I kept convincing myself I was just having a little fun, and that I would stop before things went too far. But things always go too far, don't they? The worst part. I started to want them, not just the attention, but them. Each one of them was so different, but in their own way, they gave me something I was missing. And every time I saw them, I felt like I was someone new. Someone different from the woman who was just John's wife. One evening, when John was away on a business trip, I ended up at Jason's place with the other two guys. We were all a little tipsy, joking around, and for the first time in weeks, I felt free. No one expected anything from me. No one was looking for the perfect wife. They just wanted me without any responsibilities or obligations. And that's when it happened. Jason kissed me. It wasn't even planned. But it happened, and I didn't stop it. It felt like a floodgate had opened, and everything I'd been keeping inside for months came rushing out. The guilt, the confusion, the desperation to feel something again. But it wasn't just about sex. It was about something deeper. I felt connected to Jason in a way that I hadn't with John in ages. And that was terrifying, because I loved John. I really did. But it wasn't enough anymore. I didn't know why, but it wasn't. And here I was, with 3 of his closest friends, in a situation I could never have imagined in a million years. So, what do you do when you're in too deep? When you know you've crossed a line and there's no way back, when everything you've built feels like it's slowly crumbling, and you have no idea how to fix it. Well, let me tell you, you don't fix it. At least, not easily. And I didn't know how to stop. I'm not sure when things started to feel like they were slipping out of my control. It wasn't the first kiss, or even the first night I spent with one of them. No, it was when I couldn't look at John the same way anymore. It was when I started avoiding him, when I couldn't even make small talk without feeling like a fraud. John had no idea. He still thought everything was fine. He thought I was still going to yoga classes every Saturday morning, like I had been for months. I told him I was getting back into my routine, focusing on my health again, just like I promised I would. He didn't question it. He never thought twice. He trusted me. And I hated myself for that. The lies were starting to stack up, one on top of the other, until I didn't even know which one was the truth anymore. I would tell John I was going to meet a friend for coffee when I was really meeting Chris. Or I'd say I had to work late when I was spending the night with Jason or Ryan. And every time, I felt a little worse. But somehow, I couldn't stop. It wasn't just about sex anymore. It wasn't even about the attention. It was about the way they made me feel alive. They made me feel wanted, like I was more than just the woman who cooked dinner, took care of the house, and smiled through every day. With them, I was someone else. Someone who didn't have to worry about being perfect all the time. Someone who didn't have to be the good wife or the good mother, even though I wasn't even a mother yet, but that pressure was already there. I thought it was just a phase, a temporary distraction, but it wasn't. The more I did it, the more I felt like I was becoming a different person. And when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize who was staring back at me. I was becoming the woman I'd always judged. The one who'd slept with her husband's friends without a second thought. The one who didn't care that everything she was doing would destroy the life she'd worked so hard to build. It was the 3rd time I slept with Chris that I realized I couldn't keep living this way. But by then, it was too late. I had already gone too far. I couldn't stop, and that's when the guilt hit me like a ton of bricks. I was standing in the kitchen, making breakfast for John like I always did, and I was holding back tears. I had just gotten back from Chris's place, and my mind was spinning. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. I didn't know how I was supposed to fix this mess. Every time I saw John, I could hear my own lies ringing in my ears. Every time he kissed me, I felt like I was suffocating. I was still pretending. I was still acting like everything was fine, like I was still the wife he knew and loved. But I wasn't. Not anymore. And that's when it happened. John came home early that day. I wasn't expecting him for another hour. But there he was, walking through the front door, looking at me with his usual warm smile. I remember everything about that moment so clearly. The way his eyes softened when he saw me, the way he dropped his bag and kissed me on the cheek like it was just another ordinary day. But I didn't kiss him back, and he noticed. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "You okay?" I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to tell him everything, how I was falling apart inside, how I couldn't keep up the lies, how I didn't know how to fix this. But I couldn't. I couldn't find the words. I couldn't bring myself to ruin everything, even though I knew I already had. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice cracking. "Just tired." John didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press the issue. Instead, he sat down at the table and started talking about his day. But all I could think about was Chris. I could still smell him on my skin. I could still feel the weight of the decisions I'd made hanging over me like a dark cloud. I couldn't concentrate on anything John was saying. I felt like I was a million miles away. Later that evening, after dinner, when we were sitting on the couch watching TV, I tried to act normal, but I couldn't. I was too far gone. The guilt had built up to the point where I felt like I was suffocating. I wanted to confess, but I didn't know how. I didn't know where to start. But then, as if on cue, John turned to me and said, "I don't know, Em. Lately you've been different. I feel like I don't really know you anymore. You're distant. And I don't know why. What's going on?" And that was it. That was the moment I had been dreading. It felt like the ground dropped out from beneath me. I couldn't lie anymore. I couldn't pretend anymore. I turned away from him, unable to look him in the eyes. I could feel the tears coming, but I fought them back. "John, I started, but the words wouldn't come. He waited for me to continue, but I couldn't find the strength. And then he asked it. The question that I knew was coming. "Are you seeing someone else?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to deny it. But how could I? How could I lie to him when the truth was right there, sitting between us, suffocating me? I don't know how to explain this, but I'm sorry. I've messed up, John. I never meant for any of this to happen, but it did. He looked at me, hurt and confused, and I saw the pain in his eyes, pain that I had caused. I felt like the worst person in the world. "I didn't want to hurt you," I whispered. "I don't know why I did it." And in that moment, I felt like everything was coming to an end. I thought I could keep lying to him. I thought I could keep pretending. That somehow I'd be able to walk away from this and move on with my life. But in that moment, as John looked at me with those shattered eyes, I knew there was no going back. The damage was done, and there was no way to undo what I had done to him. He didn't shout. He didn't throw things or demand to know every single detail. He just stared at me, the silence between us heavy, almost suffocating. The hurt in his eyes was unbearable. I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. "I need you to explain," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "How could you do this? With my friends, Emily? How long has this been going on?" I felt my stomach twist. I couldn't even look at him as I spoke. I had to look down, the shame too overwhelming. "I didn't mean for it to happen, John. It started with nothing. Just me hanging out with them, you know. I thought it was innocent, just a bit of fun. I never thought it would turn into this. But one thing led to another, and I couldn't stop. I didn't know how to stop." John didn't interrupt me. He just kept staring at me, as though he couldn't quite comprehend what I was saying. And honestly, I couldn't blame him. If I were him, I wouldn't have been able to believe it either. "I never wanted to hurt you," I said again, my voice breaking. "I love you, John. I do." But somewhere along the way, I started feeling empty. I started craving attention, craving something that I wasn't getting at home. It wasn't about them. It was about me. I was trying to fill a hole I didn't know how to fix. And in the process, I lost myself. I lost you. His face softened for just a second, but I could see the anger bubbling up behind his eyes. He was trying to hold it in, trying not to explode, but I could feel it. The disappointment, the betrayal, the devastation. "How long, Emily?" he asked again, his voice shaking now. "How long have you been seeing them? How long have you been lying to me?" It felt like everything was crashing down. The weight of the lies, the weight of the guilt, the weight of the years we'd spent together. All of it was coming down on me in that moment. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at him, my heart breaking into pieces. "I don't know how to tell you this," I whispered, "but it's been months. Since last summer. I'm so sorry." I could see the shock in his eyes. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. "Months," he repeated softly, like he was trying to process the sheer length of time I'd been hiding this from him. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I was waiting for him to yell, for him to demand answers, for him to leave me. But he didn't. Instead, he just stood up and walked toward the window, staring out at the world outside like it had nothing to do with him anymore. "I thought I knew you, Emily. I thought you were the one person I could trust, the one person who would never hurt me." His voice broke, and that was the moment I knew everything had changed. "I don't know how to look at you the same way anymore," he said quietly. "I don't know how to move forward from this. How do I trust you again? How do I look at you, knowing that you were with them?" Behind my back, I couldn't answer him. There was no answer. There was nothing I could say that would make this right. The trust was broken. The marriage was broken. And no matter how much I wished I could turn back time, I knew it was too late. John, please. I begged, my voice barely audible. I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. But I can't change what I've done. You're right, he said softly. You can't change it. But I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I don't even know who you are anymore. I don't know who I am in this. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I had lost him. I knew I had, and I had no one to blame but myself. John stayed quiet for a while, and when he finally spoke again, his voice was steady, but there was a finality to it that I couldn't ignore. I need space, Emily. I need time to figure out if I can ever trust you again, if we can fix this. But right now, I don't know if I can. I nodded again, the weight of his words crushing me. I understand, I whispered. And that was it. That was the last time I saw him that night. The next few days were a blur. John stayed in the spare room, and I stayed in our bedroom, both of us avoiding the inevitable conversation that was coming. I tried to talk to him, tried to explain myself, but every time I did, he would just shut down, like he couldn't bear to hear my words anymore. We didn't talk for a week after that. He was distant, cold, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if there was anything left to fix. When he finally spoke to me again, it wasn't what I expected. I don't know if I can forgive you, he said. I don't know if I can get past this. But I need time. I could see it in his eyes. The love was still there, but it was buried under the hurt and the betrayal. I had broken something in him. And no matter how much I apologized, no matter how much I begged him to understand, I knew it might never be the same again. The truth is, I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know if we can rebuild what we had, or if he'll ever be able to look at me the same way. All I know is that I messed up, and now I have to live with the consequences. And maybe, just maybe, this is the kind of thing that can't be undone.